You know, I recognize that folks in the press love to see Republican on Republican violence. And so you want me to say something bad about Donald Trump or bad about John McCain or bad about anyone else. I'm not going to do it.
Republican presidential candidate Senator Ted Cruz of Texas refusing to pile on to the Donald Trump scenario, as so many of his rivals seem to do, rather enthusiastically yesterday and earlier in the show. Let's talk it all over with our roundtable. Peter, let me ask you this. I could have predicted, I feel, that Trump was going to say something controversial and the entire Republican establishment was going to jump on him. I didn't know what it was going to be, but boy, does the RNC want him away.
Yeah. Well, because every minute we're talking about Donald Trump and some outrageous thing he said, A, it cheapens the process. It makes it look like a reality show rather than a serious, sober contest for the presidency of the United States. And B, it means we're not talking about all the failings that President Obama that they'd like to talk about, right? I mean, they'd like to get out there and talk about how this administration and its former Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, have failed in this way and that way. Instead, they're talking about, you know, Donald Trump and the latest crazy things you might have said.
Except to play devil's advocate here, Dana, he has brought up the issue of immigration that a lot of Republicans are worried about talking about, but a lot of the base loves to talk about.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a good reason why he is doing so well. It's not just because he is incredibly entertaining. It's because he's talking about something that a lot of the base were frustrated that the other candidates didn't want to talk about. But I just actually want to say something that may be counterintuitive in that, you know, historically, you just don't go there. You don't go there against any veteran. You certainly don't go there against somebody who was, you know, effectively, you know, in a box for 5 years. And, you know, John McCain can't even lift his arms
because he was tortured.
Because he was tortured and because his bones didn't heal right after his plane crashed. Having said that, I think that there is a big part of the electorate, bigger than we think, perhaps, that isn't that offended by these comments because they are equally frustrated with the John McCains of the world on the issue of immigration. So I think, you know, a few years ago it would have been lights out Donald Trump, and I'm not so sure that's the case anymore.
Well, let me ask you about that. Congressman Hurd, I want to ask you, as the Republican at the table, I've heard from a lot of Democrats who only 11 years ago, 2004, when John Kerry was the nominee of the Democratic Party. Recall, let's see if we can show those pictures. The Republican National Convention, there's somebody with a Band-Aid that is mocking John Kerry's 3 Purple Hearts. And then one of the standard bearers of the Republican Party came on CNN and said this.
But 3 Purple Hearts have never bled that I know of. I mean, they're all superficial wounds.
Now, Bob Dole went on to later kind of walk those comments back a little, but is there a double standard here? Are Republicans, they say, there's no place in our party or our country for comments that disparage those who have served honorably? Well, unless you're a Democrat.
No, you don't criticize anybody's service. You know, someone that's willing to go overseas, put their lives in harm's way in order for all of us to sleep well at night, you don't disparage that. I don't care what party you're at.
Don?
I totally agree with the congressman. Yet I remember 2004. But look, I think the Republicans are struggling with excommunicating Donald Trump, and some Republicans are trying to embrace him just in case he drops out and they want to, you know, be able to accrue those votes. They have a real branding problem with Hispanics, and they've been working on it for years, the Republicans. And now here comes this big celebrity. He's a celebrity now.
Sure.
But he's a celebrity with a huge following because he's standing up to the establishment, but he's also blocking, I think, some of the sunshine that some of the other Republicans, like Mr. Kasich, Mr. Rubio, and others, they would like to have this moment in the sun so that they can qualify for the first debate.
So let me turn to another inter-party warfare, which is the Democratic Party. There was a Netroots Nation convention, a gathering of liberal activists in Phoenix, and there was a moment where one of the Democratic presidential candidates, former Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley, was shouted down when he said all lives matter in a question about Black Lives Matter. Take a look.
Every life matters, and that is why this issue is so important. Black lives matter, white lives matter, all lives matter. Black lives matter, white lives matter, all lives matter.
I read a column on a liberal blog saying that he was using the language of white supremacy. Can you explain why people would be mad at somebody saying all lives matter?
Well, first of all, I don't approve of and I don't condone shouting down anyone, because I do believe that when these speakers, these presidential candidates come, they want to be heard, and clearly I like the back and forth. That being said, there's a real cry out there, a cry from a generation that wants to be heard, that feel crushed by the street violence that they are experiencing and the unjust police tactics that they're also experiencing. So they want to be heard, and they don't want to be grouped together with All Lives Matter. They want candidates to understand their pain, their frustration. They've attended too many funerals, and they're not going to allow candidates to come in and pander without addressing these issues. One in particular is the woman who was killed. Well, I don't know the circumstances, so apologize for that.
She's found dead in the Texas prison.
Miss Bland, who was really one of the heroes behind the Black Lives Matter. So there's a lot of frustration, and I would advise candidates, Democrats and Republicans, to figure out what's going on. Because if they decide to go on a stage and not address these issues, they will shout them down.
Figure out what's going on. Good words to live by, Peter, Donna, Congressman Dana. Thank you so much. After the break, join me at my giant wall of cartoons for this week's State of the Cartoonian.